How would you like it if someone was watching you and monitoring your moves? Then you reach into your pocket, and that's the thing, the cell phone that keeps an eye on you everywhere you go.
Is our dependency on technology infringing our right to privacy?
Today we'll be discussing the ethical issues in regards to technology.
My name is Kyle, and I'm going to be talking about this subject from the perspective of Thomas Hobbes.
My name is Austin. I'll be speaking about this subject from the perspective of Socrates.
I'm Donatella, and I'll be discussing this topic in the perspective of Immanuel Kant.
I am Samantha, and I will be discussing this through the view of James Stuart Mill.
Before we start, we're going to go over a couple definitions just so that everyone is on the same page. First, we're going to go with privacy. According to our research, privacy is the ability of an individual or a group to seclude themselves or information about themselves and thereby express themselves selectively. It is also the freedom from unauthorized intrusion.
Second, then, is metadata. Is the data that we accumulate through the daily usage of technology to which companies can accumulate and sell to third parties.
So it was important for us to define the terms of privacy and metadata because they're the foundation of this discussion, as privacy is an innate issue in the collection of metadata. We're going to start the discussion by discussing the question of, is it ethical for businesses to use metadata?
In the view of Mill, he would look at it from both perspectives of costs and benefits. By companies taking and using your metadata, are they doing it to benefit the greatest number of people, or are they doing it to solely benefit themselves? In a way, it could be beneficial in that they could potentially suggest a product to you that you may need, but on the other hand, are they doing it to solely benefit themselves to maximize the greatest amount of profit?
From Hobbes' reading of the natural condition of mankind, he describes liberty as being the highest value, and freedom is the most important thing. But he also discusses how he believes that giving up freedoms also makes us a little bit better off. So from his perspective, I believe that he would agree that businesses should be able to use metadata, and it would be an ethical response in regarding their work.
In the perspective of Socrates, he would use the ring of Gyges, but first, to explain the ring of Gyges, we need to know what it is. So a farmer, back in the old days, in time of ancient Greece, he stumbles across a ring, and he finds out that this ring is magic and can turn him invisible. So he goes up, kills his king, seduces the wife, and then becomes king of that region. And within the story, they said it wasn't ethical for the farmer to do this, and so too is it not ethical for businesses to use metadata, because the metadata in our sense is the ring of Gyges, is the invisible force that collects all data from us, to which the companies can utilize to sell to other companies to have ads directed towards us, or have our personalities be thrown about online without our knowledge.
And in the Kant perspective, he would view this in terms of the rational decision in the context of utilizing personal information from consumers for business purposes. He would go against the utilitarian perspective in saying that it would have the net benefit of everyone, because he believes that it's impossible to know what the net benefit is for everyone because we're all entitled to our own autonomy, and using metadata can infringe upon this. But another perspective also is that using metadata helps consumers tailor their ads towards their customers, making them more easily recognizable and likely to be used. So it might benefit some consumers in that they can have access to the products that they're actually searching for. However, is the use of metadata serving the business more, or is it serving the customers more? That's sort of the line of where Kant would draw if using metadata is for goodwill or if it's for personal satisfaction from the companies.
It's definitely for the companies.
Right.
Because if you look at it, the companies are the ones that set up the metadata and so for them to make a profit. and the company needs to know about you and how in order to sell their product to you. So
Right.
so it does make sense for them to collect data, but where's the line? Because if the company can continually keep gaining data from you and continually just pushing out these products and pushing out these ads that are completely directed towards you,
Mhm.
is there a way that we can like be like, okay, this is the end, like, all right, you know this much about me, I only want you to know this much about
Right.
me.
Yeah, so
So
it's a matter of how much of our information do they have access to, and what are we agreeing to?
so
But Mill would try and make a list of pros and cons, and it cannot be clearly determined what's the most optimistic action, because that can only be determined by the unit of measurement, and you can't take a unit of measurement of well-being, so it's kind of hard to take one side of whether it's more beneficial for the company or more beneficial for the consumer.
From Hobbes, he kind of believes, I talk about the right of nature, where we have the right by nature to do whatever we see fit to look out for our own self-interest, which I would include in maintaining our own privacy, which correlates also with the law of nature, which would trump the first one, which is the rational rule which forbids man to do anything destructive to his own life or means of preserving it. And that's kind of like keeping yourself from giving out your information.
so then what ethical dilemmas would be proposed if companies could use our metadata unadulterated?
Looking at this issue through the Kant perspective, we would consider the idea of lying and deception in this case, because if the organizations are informing us that that they have access to our metadata, then it's sort of that buyer's beware mentality where it's the role of the client or the customer to research if their information is being used ethically or not, although the organization also has a role to make sure that they are informing their clients that they are going to use their information. Otherwise, manipulation and deception are also dilemmas in this issue.
Well, from the utilitarianism view, if selling the data was only to benefit the people, then it would be considered ethical because it would be to the benefit of the greatest amount of people. However, if companies are using our data for their own personal use, such as taking our social security number and using that to maximize their profit to sell off to other companies, then it could potentially have adverse effects on people. Then it would no longer be ethical in the utilitarianism view because it's not benefiting the greatest amount of people any longer.
A quote from Hobbes on mankind is that the ethical dilemma would be the war of all against all, which would relate to the fact that we want our privacy, but it is a war for all that is out there to attain our information, our private information. With the limited supply of given information that's already out there, we would create enemies, as Hobbes would put it, fighting to get that information and that privacy.
So then the ethical dilemmas and the perspective of Socrates, again, would be the unadulterated access to our own persona. And again, with the ring of Gyges, because if the government or companies were to have access to our metadata, to which we subconsciously accumulate through the daily usage of technology, that would be bad because they would have the access they need to everyone, and that is incriminating on our own privacy. Look at the case with what is happening with Apple versus the FBI. The government wants to get into that phone, and they want a backdoor, to which Apple denies that allowing them to have that backdoor, but the government wants it in order to find more information about the San Bernardino killings, and there's this fight between them. And the thing with the Ring of Gyges is if we were to have a backdoor to that phone, what's to say that backdoor won't be accumulated among all phones of that type or future phones of generations. And if the government can have that backdoor, that would then give them the ultimate power to our privacy, to our metadata, to our emails on our phones, and to our conversations. Albeit they already have that through the use of the NSA, but they would have even more information at their disposal about our own personal selves, interfering with our own lives without the need of a warrant, without the need to go through the judicial system. And that is something that Socrates would not agree with.
As to the part of giving up freedoms and liberties, Hobbes would believe that having that backdoor into a cell phone would ultimately be just, through if there was, say, a crime committed, such as we mentioned for the San Bernardino case, that there should be a way to get that information needed no matter what.
Through the utilitarianism view, sometimes we do have to be selfless at times to create the greatest good for maximum. In the terms of utilitarianism, sometimes we do have to be selfless at times to maximize the greatest good of society, and giving up those freedoms could potentially help our society in not having another case such as San Bernardino, and could prevent that situation.
After discussing the implications of these ethical dilemmas with privacy and metadata, we're now going to go into seeing how truly private we are. Our privacy is no longer just information we give. Now there are ways through backdoors to gain information about us that might not necessarily be open to everyone. Now through phones, emails, and internet, we lose the freedoms and liberties that Hobbes explains are a good thing to sometimes give up, for the case of doing what is right or ethical to further benefit ourselves.
We aren't very private anymore, but it could be potentially for the greatest amount of overall well-being to society. However, that can never truly be measured because there is no unit to measure the well-being.
Technology has infringed on our privacy, and the Kant perspective would support this in that in the categorical imperative, a deed is only good in its innate goodness. So it's not as an ends or a means to an end. And unfortunately, metadata uses people or the information as a means to an end for profit, and thus infringes on people's privacy in an immoral way.
And I would agree with that, actually, because we are not very private. Because in terms of social media and government agencies, they keep putting their invisible hands into our personal lives and ultimately reaches into our psyche. This can be applied to companies and governments too, because they are trying to maintain the status quo. In order for them to do that, they need this data, they need this ring to be the invisible force in our lives, ever monitoring us, ever watching us, so that they can direct targeted ads or, in the name of our security, protect us from evildoers. But there is a line for when they think they are protecting us or when they're just trying to subjugate us. What is the line between the proper utilization of the metadata we've been talking about to the exploitation of it? Or is there a line at all? A couple years ago, there was a female customer at Target that was doing research on child care products on the website. This girl was around 16, 17 years of age, and Target thought it was a good idea to send out targeted coupons towards those ads. They sent out diaper coupons and baby crib coupons, and the dad caught wind of this and became infuriated when those ads and coupons would not stop, and he went up to them and said, there's no one in our house is pregnant. No one needs these coupons, so please stop sending them. And Target was like, we send these ads out for the search results, for what whomever in your house is searching for. And he soon finds out that his daughter is pregnant. So Target knew that his own daughter was pregnant before the father knew. So there has to be a line between what companies can use the metadata for, because if they're peering into our lives at every every waking hour, I don't think we have any privacy. And people who give up their freedom in order to do that deserve neither. In the words of Benjamin Franklin, those who surrender freedom for security will have, nor do they deserve either one.
Okay, to the pregnancy scandal, as I previously mentioned earlier, Hobbes believes in giving up freedom makes us better off, but as it relates to human nature, I think he would disagree with the idea of a business using your personal information in order to send you items in mail that expose that info to others who may previously not have known, which would be an example of something not happening in our best interests that is of human nature.
But if we give up our freedom, doesn't that mean we give up everything else that we stand for? Because the freedom, in this essence, I say, would be the ring of Gyges, because the ring allows us the ultimate power to experience the greatest human experience we can possibly have, and that is living a life we choose. And living, at least in the country to which we live in, we can exasperate those rules and regulations to what we see fit. And if someone takes those and takes advantage of that, I don't think that could be beneficial for anybody, because then they are using their own ring in contradiction to what we truly hold to believe to be true.
In a utilitarian view, you are trying to acquire optimistic balance. Good for some people, but also has some downsides. But in this case, it wouldn't benefit the greatest amount of people, as seen with the young girl. So it would not be considered the utilitarianism way.
In the Kantian perspective, we would consider the aspects of autonomy and rationality in this case. When Target targeted those ads and sent the coupons to the girl's house, unfortunately, they infringed upon her autonomy to express the fact that she was pregnant on her own time, and instead Target took advantage and manipulated the information that they had in order to serve them and in order to improve their sales, instead of considering the effects that it might have on the privacy of the individuals.
At Target, December 2013, hackers breached into the system, gaining access to credit and debit card information, along with names of people, mailing addresses, email addresses, or phone numbers. So this is another situation where metadata in hacking can be a problem. Mill said that there is moral flexibility, and that means that there are moral prohibitions against lying or stealing may sometimes be broken, but in this case, when it comes to people's credit cards information, this would be a place where moral flexibility is not applicable.
Hobbes believes egoism and self-interest are part of the natural condition of mankind. A breach in our information would lower our own self-interest. By the releasing of that private information, giving others the chance to use that to possibly hack in and steal that for their own personal benefit and purchases.
The Target breaching is an example of one of the main dilemmas of collecting metadata, as it leaves people vulnerable to the infringement of consumers' privacy. In the Kantian perspective, we would see the use of metadata as potentially ineffective because it can lead to deception and manipulation of others.
And that's where Socrates comes in with the manipulation and deception. If we all recall the story about the ring, as been mentioned many times during this podcast, if someone were to collect all the metadata, for which they did during the hacks, they were able to then peer into our own personal lives and then essentially exploit everything they gain, stealing our lives and gaining every possible resource that we have accumulated during our existence, to which is something that should not be had, and Socrates and Plato would never agree or submit to any of that kind of ruling.
So, in this podcast, we discuss the moral and ethical issue of privacy and technology through the use of metadata collection, and we use the examples of the Apple versus FBI case and the Target breaching to demonstrate that this issue is very relevant to our time. We also looked at this issue through the philosophical lens of Hobbes, Mill, Socrates, and Kant. We thank you very much for listening in.